Hello friends, welcome all of you to this webinar on setting up funds in Singapore, and we're drawing a small comparison with GIFT IFSC in India. So I welcome my esteemed speakers from Singapore, Mahib Gupta and Alan. Welcome to this webinar. So friends, the audience in this webinar are from various parts of India. So we see the across 22 cities in India and from 7 countries who have joined in this webinar. And we hope that it will be a very wonderful, enriching experience with the esteemed speakers who are there with us today. And we are very thankful for them finding some time from their busy schedule and participating in this webinar. So first of all, I would introduce my speakers today. We have Mr. Mahib Gupta. He is partner Dhruva Advisors from Singapore. And Mahib Gupta is a partner with Dhruva Advisors Singapore. Previously, he was in similar lead role with PwC Singapore. Dhruva Advisors offers a wide range of services in tax and regulatory space to clients in India and Singapore. And maybe I would say the right would be to around the world. So they also have a strong track record for designing and implementing pioneering solutions in several areas of domestic and international tax. So Mahib, you are most welcome to this webinar, and we will hear you out in few seconds. Friends, we have another speaker with us, Alan Gu. He is Head Operations of Crypto Fund Services, Singapore, providing his skill set and industry knowledge to operations of crypto and fund management. He has excellent knowledge on operations and management and setting funds, and he would be sharing his experience and his knowledge with our participants today. So Alan has extensive experience in alternative fund industry. He has worked with both large and medium level funds, administration companies in assisting and guiding clients through the new fund and launch conversion process and ensuring a smooth transition for the clients. So friends, we hope we have a 360-degree expertise in this webinar to give you information about funds in Singapore, and then we can see how India is developing, how the investors, global investors have reposed their confidence in Singapore for alternate investments. So with this, I would first invite our first speaker, Mahib Gupta, to share the experience and views with our audience. And audience, if you have the questions, please put in the chat box, and I'll be taking up those questions to our speakers post their session or at the end of the session as it is fine. So please keep tapping your questions in the chat box. We'll take all of them, and if some are not possible, we'll definitely reply one-to-one through our through emails. So most welcome.
Thank you so much, Samir. A very good afternoon to all participants from India. A very good evening to all of you from Singapore. In my session over next 15 minutes, I will take you through the broad key features of Singapore as a fund regime, and in particular the recent introduction of the VCC and the key tax features of the VCC scheme. Before we go through the specific aspects of the VCC as a fund structure, we would take you through the overview of Singapore as a fund domiciliation hub, or the world-renowned global financial services center. For many of the fund managers, Singapore is considered as one of the most prominent hub globally for its various features, including the tax efficiencies, both for the fund managers as well as the funds. So you can structure the funds in Singapore in a very tax neutral way, whereby all the profits coming to the fund from various investments can be parked here in a tax exempt manner, and also the distributions can happen in completely tax free way. Also, it offers various benefits for the fund managers who are based there, including some tax incentives, lower tax rate for the fund managers as well here. And as a financial center, it is regulated by Monetary Authority of Singapore, which is considered to be world's one of the most progressive yet a very resilient regulator, which regulates the financial center, including the fund management industry, in a very balanced way in terms of while applying the regulations in a very strict way, it also guides the industry towards developing Singapore as a hub for their global operations. Also, Singapore has access to very skilled talent pool in the financial services industry, which places it at number one as per the recent studies in the entire Asia Pacific, and number three globally as far as its talent competitiveness is concerned. And it has a very pro business environment, rated as number two in the world for the ease of doing business. And very recently, it has also emerged as a prominent hub for domiciliation of funds with the introduction of VCC. Apart from VCC, which of course I will be talking about, you can have many options to choose from for setting up a fund in Singapore, whether you want to set up a plain vanilla corporate vehicle or a trust structure or a limited partnership. You have all the options available. And variable capital company VCC recently introduced gives you an additional option, which I will be talking about. So variable capital company can cover all kind of strategies, whether traditional or alternative asset strategies. It can be open-ended or close-ended fund entity. Basically, a VCC allows for the segregation of portfolios in terms of the asset and liabilities in separate cells or separate sub-funds, and that offers the economy of scale to those fund managers who want to quickly launch the funds after promoting the VCC. And basically, the purpose of the VCC is limited only as a fund vehicle. You cannot carry on separate business activity in a VCC vehicle. It is only meant to be a collective investment vehicle where the entry and the redemption can happen at the NAV basis. My colleague speaker Alan will take you through many other features of this VCC in detail from a corporate law perspective. I will move on to the other aspects. Very broadly, a VCC can be a standalone, which comprise only of one fund. And other category of VCC is the umbrella VCC, where you can promote various sub funds within one umbrella VCC. From a tax perspective, it offers various benefits in terms of the entire tax incentive can be applied at the umbrella VCC, which basically exempts largely almost the entire investment income which VCC or its sub-funds get from the Singapore taxation. So once you apply for the tax incentive at the umbrella level, you can keep adding further sub-funds with mere intimation to the authority here, and all the subsequent sub-funds can continue to enjoy the same tax exemption till the time this tax incentive scheme remains on the legislation. The other benefits of the VCC from investors' perspective, that dividends can also be paid out of the capital and not only profits, as compared to a plain vanilla company which can only pay dividend out of the profits. In VCC, simply you can pay dividend out of the capital, and your NAV of the VCC is basically equal to its capital. So if you declare any dividend, then your NAV basically, or the share capital for that matter, stands reduced to that extent. And that's why it is called variable capital. Capital can vary as per the NAV. All the assets and liabilities of the VCC and its sub-fund are completely ring-fenced in a very stringent manner. Even a private contractual arrangement which tries to overcome this ring fencing is considered to be void as per the Singapore law. From a taxation perspective, if you have investors from the US, you can even check the box at the VCC level, which allows for treating of the VCC as a partnership entity for US tax purposes. In taxation wise, it is more efficient because of the example which I gave you, that once you apply for a tax incentive at an umbrella level, it can apply for even at the sub-fund level. And also the benefits of tax treaties can be availed at the overall VCC level. As I mentioned, the redemption of capital can happen at NAV and does not require any company law procedures which a plain vanilla company requires. You can flexibly also list some of the sub-funds of the VCC on the stock markets, and there's no requirement for the financial statement to be made public, offering privacy to the investors. Even the investor data is not publicly available; it remains at the fund manager level. And VCC can also be used as a master feeder structure, which I will discuss in the subsequent slide. So in typical fund structure, you may have the investor coming directly into the VCC. As it happens, for a number of years. A second option, there can be a Cayman feeder, which can be a limited partnership in Cayman, which can pool the funds of global investors, which can come into VCC as a corporate entity. And you can have a third alternative where some funds may come from Cayman feeder and some may come directly. There may be some tax treaty related challenges where feeder is in Cayman, then the challenges can be raised by the relevant tax treaty partner, for example, Indian authorities, that if there is a pooling happening in the Cayman, then why you need to invest through VCC, and they may raise the challenges that if Cayman would have come directly to India, then tax treaty was not available, then why we should grant tax treaty to the VCC. So considering that challenge in mind, you can also create a double layer VCC structure where the upper layer acts as the VCC feeder, where for any US taxable investor, if you want to treat this VCC feeder as a partnership entity, you can simply check the box at the upper level VCC feeder here. From a tax perspective, the key Singapore tax features, a VCC, even though it may have multiple sub-funds, it is treated as a single entity for tax purposes, especially the corporate tax purposes. The tax exemption, which I was talking about under section 13O or 13U, is extended to the umbrella VCC. Tax residency certificate is available to a VCC. Typically in Singapore, a tax residency certificate is given either to a VCC or a corporate entity only. So if you are having any trust or partnership structure for the fund, that is not eligible for the tax treaty. So while the VCC offers benefits and flexibility, which is similar to a partnership or trust structure, it at the same time offers you the tax treaty benefit. So that's best of both the worlds in a VCC. And you can also avail the benefit of withholding tax exemption. For example, if any investor is putting a debt capital into the VCC, typically there's a 15% withholding tax in Singapore on payment of interest. But if a VCC which is exempt under section 13O or 13U will be eligible for a withholding tax exemption from such interest withholding tax. The fund managers based in Singapore can enjoy a 10% custodian tax rate subject to certain conditions, and also the fees which is charged locally by a fund manager to the VCC could be subjected to the GST, but VCC is eligible for almost 90% refund of such GST which is applied on its inputs. This is a very broad overview of the taxation. There are largely two schemes which can be eligible for the funds which are structured in Singapore. There is a 13O scheme which is extended only to the corporate entities which are resident in Singapore. So it can be available to either a plain vanilla corporate or a VCC, both of which are the corporate structures. As per this scheme, the entire qualifying income, which is largely the entire universe of investments, except few exceptions, are exempt from tax. As I mentioned, this has to be a Singapore resident fund in form of an incorporated company in Singapore. There's one downside of 13O that if they are Singapore-based non-individual investors, then there can be a financial penalty of 17%. Applicable on such investors if they participate to the extent of more than 30% in such 13O exempt funds. At the same time, it has a flexibility of no minimum AUM requirement, but it has to still incur a operating expenditure of minimum 200,000 every year to enjoy the tax incentive. In any particular year, if it doesn't incur, then it doesn't enjoy the tax incentive. Next year, if it incurs, it will enjoy it. 13U is considered to be enhanced tier fund exemption. enhanced tier allows you to eliminate this more stringent condition of financial penalty. That's the key benefit of this 13U or enhanced tier fund scheme. But it comes with two additional requirements, that the fund manager should have minimum 3 investment professionals, and the AUM size of this fund should be minimum 50 million. Now here, for this minimum 50 million, the interesting part of the VCC is that in the case of VCC, this requirement can be met at the umbrella level. So even if you have 10 sub funds with each of them just $5 million, at the umbrella level, since it totals up to $50 million, that umbrella VCC can apply for a 13U exemption that removes the need to track the investors for this 30/50 condition otherwise applicable for 13O cases. Now, these are some of the particulars which many of you may practically find useful. As far as setup and operating cost is concerned, currently for the VCC, since 70% grant is available from MAS, the cost of setting up is much lower in most jurisdictions. As far as operating cost is concerned, it could be certainly higher because Singapore as a location is a higher cost location as compared to some other countries, including India. So typically an operating cost of a VCC would expectedly be higher as compared to operating cost of AIF, for example, in India. And location of a sponsor can be anywhere in case of a VCC, but the manager has to be in Singapore. That's the key condition. And net worth of the manager has to be minimum Singapore dollar 250,000 Singapore dollar, which would be close to some 180,000 US dollar equivalent. And there's no minimum sponsor commitment required at each fund level in Singapore. There's no minimum fund size if you are going for a 13O scheme, but if you're going for 13U scheme, as we discussed, is 50 million. And you can have both open and close-ended funds in Singapore, and there are no restriction or minimum or maximum number of investors in the fund. Investor categories could be either accredited investors, institutional or retail investors, depending on what is the license of the fund manager. And as we already mentioned, there are tax incentives available. There are some recent trends and strategies which we see for which VCCs are being used, whether it's private wealth, family office, private equity funds, Asia focused and global funds, technology funds. But more particularly, what we see that for the SPAC platforms and crypto digital asset platforms and hedge fund and REIT, Singapore definitely offers much more competitive edge as compared to many other locations. And we can, of course, if you have any specific query in relation to this, you can drop the question on this chat box, or we can have a separate one-on-one discussion later. So this brings an end to my session. With this, I will pass on to Samir for ushering in the next speaker here.
Thank you, Mike. I think it gave an overview to the audience about the Singapore, and as you said that the Singapore, obviously all of us know, is as far as cost is, it's a high, but there where we would see the expertise of crypto and where people would be able to manage the operations more effectively. And I think there are certain, again, there are questions which are there, some interesting questions are there in the chat box, which we will take later on. But at least I can ask one out of this, that one of the participant has asked, is there any benefit for Cayman fund to move to Singapore VCC fund? Just your overview. I mean, specifics we can take offline if required, but
Sure.
if you can just give just to move it forward. So
Yeah.
Can you give a small response to this?
Sure. So one of the key tax benefit for moving a Cayman fund to Singapore fund is Singapore location is obvious, that once redomiciliation is complete, and since there's a fund manager based here and there will be local directors here, it will be able to obtain the tax residency in Singapore, and then we'll be able to use the tax treaty network of Singapore. That can be one huge benefit. That's from tax perspective. And we also understand that in Cayman, it is becoming more difficult to launch the funds because there are some more stringent mutual fund regulations applicable there, more stringent economic substance requirements there, and also the perception in terms of how investor perceive a Cayman vis-a-vis Singapore. US investors still are quite neutral towards their perception about Cayman, but non-US investors do not perceive necessarily Cayman as highly, although they do know that Cayman is much simpler, but even that fact is changing.
Thank you, Mahip. I think we'll take most other questions after we hear Alan on his thing, and we will. I think audience would have got an overview on the things which you have just informed. So, Alan, now I would like to you please uh, take up the stage and introduce Krypton, and you can just explain the things about your operation, the services, and the things, the information you have to share with the audience. Thank you. Please welcome, Alan.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, hi. Thanks for inviting me on this webinar. So just let me share my screen. Right. Can you guys see my presentation?
Yeah, Alan, you can put it on presentation mode. Yeah, it's
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah,
So
it's
I
fine.
think Mahit has gave a very a very detailed overview or a very good eye view on how the BCC act. So I'm not going to bore you with an introduction of myself. Of course, I would love to give an introduction about Krypton, but I have 50 minutes, so I'd rather spend this time and give you guys some of the experience or my insights on the VCC. I'm not going to bore you guys with details and facts on what you can find online, but based on real case, scenario, history, timeline, etc. So to help you aid with your understanding as well as your decision making in whether to set up a fund in BCC as a BCC as well. So firstly, I think most of you should be quite aware that BCC has been quite hotly spoken about within the last 2 years, because the BCC was only incorporated on 15 January 2020. And with that in mind, prior to 2020, I think most fund managers they choose to domicile their funds in offshore locations like Cayman, Bermuda, BVI, Mauritius as well. But ever since BCC was launched, the truth is I haven't had too many managers talking about setting up the fund offshore. I think some of the potential factor could be cost, because MAS introduced a grant scheme, which I will talk about briefly later. But also because we look at in some of the FATF, I wouldn't say sanctions, I would say in some of the FATF finding, or rather EU, Cayman was actually blacklisted, Mauritius was in the grey list, which actually shows that in this very modern world, AML is having become a very important decision in investors' decision to domicile a fund. And also previously in Singapore, there wasn't actually a real fund structure that could accommodate how a hedge fund is going to work, how the operation of hedge fund is going to work. So I think with a BCC, it actually provides investors around the world with a very, very safe financial hub, respected, and as well as an easily accessible fund structure to domicile their fund and to put their capital in as well. So moving on, so previously there were the unit trust, private limited company, and limited partnership. All could work as a fund, no doubt. But there's always good, but those are not set up primarily with purpose of being a collective investment scheme. Of course, unit trust is meant to protect, mainly used to in Singapore for mutual funds for retail investors. But the regulatory cost is actually extremely high, because you need to have a licensed trustee to be a trustee to have how do I put it, supervision over the fund structure. A private limited company, like what we say, has some restrictions. For example, you have to when issue shares, you need to file with ACRA, which is the statutory body for companies in Singapore. And also you can't pay dividends out of capital, which is one of the for cons of setting up a fund as a private limited company. And of course, a limited partnership, which is very popular for closed-ended funds. But the thing is that because it's not a corporate structure, you don't get access to some of the tax treaties that Singapore has in place with various countries. So I mean, Mahib has gone through the key features of BCC, so I'm not going to go through this in detail. Moving on, so how does the ecosystem of BCC work? So of course, it's a fund. It needs to be regulated. It needs to have a fund manager. As we speak right now, a BCC is only open to be managed by fund managers regulated in Singapore by MAS. I haven't heard anything about opening this up to foreign regulated managers, but I don't know whether it's coming or not. But right now, this is a requirement. Next, it needs to have a corporate secretary that based in Singapore as well. It needs to have a custodian. It doesn't need to be Singapore based, but as long as a regular custodian, that will do. As well, you also need to have a Singapore based auditor, resident director for of course substance as well. But take note that for the director, at least one of the director has to be part of the fund manager, and it must be a resident director. So that being said, these two requirements can be double-headed into a single director. So for example, if I am a fund manager, I'm a director of a fund manager, and I set up a VCC. I stay in Singapore, so I can fulfill both requirements, and I can be the sole director of a VCC. Right now, as we speak, there is no requirement for independent directors for a VCC. And in a way, I haven't seen a VCC without fund administrators. One of the reasons is because a fund administrator is one of the requirements for the 13O and 13U requirement, which requires you to have a Singapore-based fund administrator as well. So this is just a high-level summary of how each different stakeholders they will come into play when it comes to set up a VCC. Of course, there are also other parties such as legal counsel, but legal counsel typically comes into play at the very onset when you're drafting the document, and you usually do not need their advice on the ongoing basis unless you're setting up, making changes to the fund structure, etc. itself. So back to some of the why Singapore is a very popular fund structure. And one of the reasons why is because it is a FATF full member country, very strong AML policies as well. So a VCC is not expected to have any employees within it. And also a VCC is not regulated by the MAS. It's only regulated by MAS for AML purposes. So in the absence of employees and regulatory status, MAS actually issued a notice called the Notice VCC N01, which you all can find online. If you can't find online, just drop us an email. I'm sure that we're more than happy to send you the guidelines as well as the notice. So what happened is, under the guidelines and the notice, VCCs will need to appoint something called the eligible financial institution to have overall supervision of the AML work in the VCC itself. So the notice actually defines an EFI as a regulated entity in MAS. So if you look through the MAS Directory of Financial Institutions, there is plenty of FIs, but not all of them can be the EFI. For example, money changers are also regulated by MAS, but they can't be the EFI. So just take a look, but most regulated FIs can be the EFI. But in most cases, the fund manager itself being a regulated entity as well, regulated FI, they will act as the EFI for the VCC. And in this case, what happened is the VCC will have to follow the procedure, the AML policies and procedures set up by the EFI to make sure that all of the AML work is being covered off when it comes to onboarding investors as well as investments itself. Next is a grant scheme. So when the VCC launched, MAS kept this very close to their chest. So when it launched, they announced that to encourage the early adoption of the VCC, they have launched a grant scheme. So what is a grant scheme? Essentially, what it means is your setup cost, be it your incorporation cost, your corporate secretary setup cost to incorporate the company, your legal counsel fee to draft the legal documents, tax advisory fees, tax advisory review fees on the PPM, etc., fund admin setup fee. All of these fees can be all these are subject to the grant, meaning that if you incorporate the VCC within 3 years, within the first 3 years of the VCC inception date, and if as a fund manager, this is your first 3 VCCs, this VCC is actually subject to the grant, meaning that if you spend 100,000 on these fees to service providers, MAS will actually reimburse you 70% of it. So and this is also one of the red hot reason why VCC has have such an early adoption rate. And that being said, other than the grant scheme, VC has been live for about 2.5, about 2.5 years now. So I think other reasons are also starting to appear very obviously to why VC has been so popular. But yeah, so the grant scheme is there. It's valid until January 2023. Don't ask me if MES is going to extend it. I have no idea. But but if you ask me, I think this is a good time to set up VCC as well. Yeah, so I think that's it for my presentation. I would say I'll open the floor for any questions now or later. So feel free to drop your questions in, and I'll hand over the time back to Samir. Samir?
Hi. So thank you, Alan, for a wonderful insight on the operation and management of the funds. And I think the audience would have appreciated and liked the information which has come from you. But here on a personal note, I would like to ask one thing, like which you mentioned 70% discount. So what is this 70% of what? I mean, what can you just a little bit elaborate on that? There is a discount of 30%, 70% refund. Can you just elaborate on what?
Okay.
70% of what?
So it's not a discount. So typically, if when you set up
Refund,
a
I
VCC,
would say refund basically.
yeah, so it is so let's say you're a fund manager, you're looking for a service provider, so you reach out to myself, fund administrator and corp services. You reach out to Mahit for tax advisory work, and you reach out to a law firm. So each of us will quote you with a setup fee, which is pretty common. So Mahit will probably let's say if he give you a fee for the tax advisory work, the lawyer give you a fee, and it all adds up to about, let's say let's just put $50,000. So what happened is the fund manager will typically pay this fee out first, and within 3 months of incorporating the VCC, the fund manager will fill out a spreadsheet, put in the expenses with the relevant invoices and documentation, send it to MAS. So MAS will process this, and within, I think, 3 to 4 months, they will rebate 70% of the fee that have been paid earlier by the fund manager back to the fund manager itself. So essentially, for a 50K setup fee, the VCC is only potentially paying 15,000 of the setup fee itself.
Okay. So I think that's a great information for the audience to know that there is a refund of 70% which they can get if they are setting a fund in Singapore. So well, friends, I think you have heard about the setting up fund in Singapore and the management about it. So we have a very small presentation about the setting up thing in GIFT IFSC. I think you would have so I think all of you would know that in India we have now GIFT City, GIFT IFSC, and in GIFT City the regulator is like in India you have SEBI. So in GIFT the regulator is IFSC-A. So this is a new thing which has happened in India, and it is gaining a lot of attraction of the investors within India and across the India. And this session was about to set up funds in Singapore, and we have speakers. They have told you about how the things are happening over there, how easy it is, and it's a good jurisdiction. Investors have a lot of confidence in Singapore, so can be approached separately after this for detailed discussions if required. But just to have a give comparison on how these jurisdictions are doing with regard to India GIFT IFSC. So we have made a small thing where details can be seen later, but just to give you an idea. So as all of you would know that GIFT is situated in Gandhinagar, Gujarat, and the government is Indian government is trying to make it a investment hub or investment place just like any other global jurisdiction. So they have a unified regulator, a good tax regime, cost advantage. Obviously, they could have a cost advantage when things are operated here as compared to other jurisdictions. So government is trying to put ease of doing business in place within this. And there is a lot of, and they have made So still it's under, I would say development, but to a certain extent, they are trying to make it to a social and physical infrastructure of an international standard. So this is a typical AIF which you set up in India or anywhere in the world. You have a, so we have just put it just for information. It was the same as you have in Singapore. In middle, you have AIF, which is a fund or a scheme, and it can be a category 1, category 2, category 3 as in India. The same similar kind of things you have in GIFT IFSC guide. Just for the information, I mean, on 19th or 20th April, IFSC has given their own regulation. Earlier, they were following something about AIF which SEBI had. So now their own set of regulations have come in few days back. So even most of our friends who are here, they would be analyzing, reading those regulations. We are also analyzing, but we have just tried to summarize and give you a gist of that in this particular session. So in this, they have introduced a, like we call fund manager. So there they have called it a fund management entity. So you have to set up a fund management entity in GIFT. So that is the first, when you start to set up a fund over there in GIFT. So that is required to be located in GIFT, or you would have a branch office over there. So presence of FME, fund management entity, which is equivalent to fund manager, is required to be there. And then it would launch, and it can launch different funds, different schemes and all those things. And the typical structure is same, that investors from India and across the India can invest there. And from there, it can be invested globally within India or any jurisdiction. So I think this is the pretty standard one in structure there in IFSC. So as I said, they have introduced 3 kind of fund management entity. One they have named authorized FME, which is the lowest one. Then you have registered non-retail FME and registered retail FME. So these are, you can call a fund manager type of fund managers, which will be there in GIFT IFSC. So authorized FME would, like if you want to, for early stage ventures, you have a venture capital scheme and there are certain limitations on it. So it is basically for venture capital scheme, your early stage or small investments which you are making, is single family offices. So these are done by these. So there, and then with registered FME, you have a different restricted schemes. Schemes here you can say equivalent to fund. So if you want to understand better, you can just simply replace the word by scheme by fund, and then you would have a better understanding about it. So we have restricted schemes, and restricted schemes would portfolio management of multi-family offices would also be there, cover this. And this is retail registered FME, which is retail or restrict, where you would be able to do ETF, REIT, InvITs, infrastructure investment trust, and all those things. So depending upon, at this point of time, the audience can understand there are different 3 types of FMEs which are required to be there. Depending upon your requirements, we can select wherein you fit and what kind of scheme, what kind of fund, and what kind of FME or what kind of networks you should have. That can be ascertained by you later on, just to have an idea that this kind of setup is there. So now this is a small about all the 3 FME, like legal structure. The first, authorized FME, registered and registered retail. So first 2 can be a company, it can be an LLP, or it can be branch of any company or LLP set up in India. So they can have a branch. As I said, FME requires to be present in IFSC. So either you incorporate there or you put up a branch over there. When you say branch, it is just like Indian company opening a branch office in US. It is the similar way. It's like that. But in registered retail FME, it has to be a company and minimum director and all those things are written. So they have provided certain relevant experiences, what kind of experience of people are required, that is there. So here we have net worth also. So the first kind of authorized FME, the net worth is required 75,000 USD. The second one is 5,500,000 and other is 1 million. So this is just about these FMEs. We'll circulate this presentation. You will have all this information later on. So all those FMEs can launch these kind of schemes. These are the 3 types of scheme or 3 types of funds broadly categorized. And within that, you have lot many things. So we said the venture capital schemes, venture capital funds can be launched by any of these. So you have of these FMEs. Restricted schemes, non-retail can be authorized and registered. And retail is registered, no, retail, this one can be. So FME contribution, as in Singapore, you saw that there is a certain requirement for sponsor. So here the requirement is of fund manager. Now the guidelines would say that of FME contribution required. So when we talk about FME contribution, it is the contribution of FME or its associate. So FME and its associate together can pool in this money for the fund. So you say this 2.5%, up to the maximum is 10% if the fund size is less than 30 million. Above 30 million, to minimum you have to put 750K, and up to maximum you can contribute up to 10%. So this is for the first kind of venture capital scheme, the FME contribution is required. And in restricted scheme, you get 2.5 to 10% below 30 million, and above 30 million it is this. And in third category, it is related to asset under management. So it is 1% of, it's like that. So the first category is closed-ended scheme, third is open and closed, and second and third can be open and closed. Now you have minimum how much, like in venture capital fund or venture capital scheme at GIFT, you can have maximum 50 investors. Okay. And there you have, and rest of the two, this second one, you have 1,000, you can have maximum up to 1,000 investors. So for example, if you want to set up a fund where you have investors, let's say 400-500 investors, then obviously then you have to move out, you have to select the different categories accordingly. What kind of activity you want to do, what are your target investors, and what is your target investment strategy. Based on that, you select those things. Investor category is there. The credit, now we are in India, we have accredited investor system in place. So either who can invest, either the investors are accredited, or they are investing about 250K, $250,000 in the first category, and it is similar in third, you can see it. So these are the category requirements for the investors to invest in these kind of funds. So minimum fund size in venture capital schemes, it has to 5 million, 5 million, 5 million. And here the in venture capital maximum is 200. So there is a maximum, what can be the maximum limit in fund of a single person. So in the venture capital scheme, there is no limit, and in restricted scheme, non-retail, there is 50% and there is 25%. So this is a broad, I'm just giving a broad to have you on GIFT. So this is a competitive tax regime. I think similarly you have in the same kind of advantages you would have in Singapore as well, which you have just heard from the speakers. Like here in GIFT, you are operating, there is 100% tax exemption, withholding tax, minimum MAT is there. So no stamp duty, GST, no capital gain tax. And there are other on transfer of securities and a lot many. So these are the basically benefits over there. So in last, we have just tried to summarize few points of GIFT and Singapore. So I think my other colleagues, my friends over here from Singapore would vouch for it. If something here and there, they can just correct it. So as I said, a sponsor contribution in GIFT, which is equivalent to fund manager FME contribution. So we have, as I told, so from the first of the category, it is 2.5% to 1% of the AUM. So in Singapore, as I said, it's not required, so my friends would correct me if something is different from what is written here. So location of a sponsor in Singapore, it is that is not required. In VCC, I think you don't have, the structure is different. So Mahip, if I say, when you're talking about in India, because most of the funds are set up as a trust, so we have a sponsor, but in VCC, I don't think a sponsor is required.
It is not required.
Yeah.
Just one thing I would highlight, that fund managers net worth should be a minimum of 250,000 Singapore dollar.
Okay, so I can, yeah,
That's
fund manager net worth, yeah.
Minimum.
So
minimum
yeah, so okay, so we correct this one. is fund manager net worth. In GIFT, it is 75K to 1 million as per the type of FME you are setting up. And on Singapore, just Mahip clarified, it is 250,000.
250 is the minimum, and there may be some capital adequacy requirement on the top of that.
Okay, great. And minimum fund size in GIFT, you have a 5 million, and in Singapore, as I said, there is, you can, so even if I want to set up a, let's say 2 million, 1 million, I can do that.
You can do that. Only thing is that for enjoying the tax exemption, you need to spend minimum $200,000 on the balance sheet of on the PNL of the fund.
Okay.
So 200,000 for a 2 million would turn out to be 10%, which may not be feasible.
Yeah. So we have to, apart from legal, one has to see the commercial aspects of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think close-ended, open-ended, in both the places you have open-ended and close-ended funds are possible. So maximum number of investors in GIFT, in different schemes, different funds, there is limitation on maximum number of investors, and in third category you don't have. But in Singapore, in all of kind of funds, you don't have any restriction of the which we see from
yes.
here. Yeah. Okay, that's good. Okay. So investor credited in India also, we have accredited investors and other higher investment thresholds, like we just mentioned, that either you have a credit investor or investor investing about 200, 250, 2,550K, $250K. So similarly, I think credit investors, similar kind of thresholds are there, or it's different?
So in terms of, I think accredited investor, it is same. The retail investor, as far as concerned, is allowed only for the fund managers who hold the retail fund management license. And typically, MAS is very stringent in granting the retail fund management licenses. Very, very few players would have that.
So in maximum single investor holding in GIFT, maximum holding of a single investor in various schemes is there. As I said, in first scheme, in venture capital scheme, you don't have any limit. In the second category, you had 50%. It means at least 2 investors are required. And in third, maximum can be up to 25%, means 4 or something like this. But in Singapore, if you see, there is no requirement of maximum single. I mean, that is not applicable there. It means whole fund can be done by one person or all categories.
Yes.
So capital gain tax, I think at both the places we don't have capital gains. So I think this is a broad overview. Alan, if you have anything to add on this, you can tell us if something is there or it's okay.
No, it's fine. Go ahead, please. I think I think we have covered things well as well.
So yeah. So I think this was the broad comparison for GIFT and Singapore, and detailed things can be discussed offline. And I think with Mahip Alan, we can take the questions now, and we have broadly, we have covered all the aspects of Singapore fund management setup and operations, and little bit comparison with GIFT. So I'll just take the questions, and Alan and Mahip can respond to those questions.
Yep.
So I think it is a general questions everywhere. What is the startup cost in Singapore? So everybody wants like to know what is the setting up timelines and cost in Singapore. So I think cost cannot be, so you can just respond to, I mean, Mahip, you can also, and thereafter Alan can also put a line to this.
Yeah, so sure. Mahip, go ahead.
Yeah, typically we see that, the cost, depending on the strategy and the complexity of the fund documentation, could range anywhere from, 50,000 to 80,000 US dollar. But as Alan highlighted, after getting the 70% refund, that cost gets reduced in the region of 20 to 30,000 US dollar plus the out-of-pocket expenses. Alan, you'd like to add further in terms of setting up?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to put ballpark figures here, right? Because I mean, there are different service providers around. You have service providers that are considered premium. You have boutique ones. So obviously, fee are going to range separately. But what I would say about BCC is that it has proved, and comments from my clients have been that BCC has been incredibly the price to set up a BCC, the cost to set up has been extremely competitive compared to other jurisdictions. Some have said it's a lot cheap. It's probably cheaper than some of the traditional offshore locations as well. But if you're talking about statutory costs, that I can give you the definite answer. To set up and incorporate a BCC with Accra, that will set you back at $8,015 and for each sub-fund registration, it will be $400 charged by Accra. And you need to note that these statutory fees are not subject to grant.
So, Alan, I think you can also just give a highlight because people want to know that what are the timelines or what are the timelines. I mean, just a wide.
Yeah,
range.
sure. I mean, best case scenario. So there's a lot of work done for a setup of BCC that can be done concurrently. But for example, you do need the BCC to be incorporated before you start the legal drafting. Because if you're so sure that you're going to set up a BCC, you can always engage a legal counsel, start drafting the documents without the company that's incorporated yet, and can work in parallel with incorporation. The fastest I've incorporated a BCC from scratch all the way to launch is 1.5 months. But of course, depending on the timeline, the response time of the various service provider, the fund manager itself, it could range from, let's say, 2 to 6 months. But I think a fair indication would be about 2 to 3 months to get the BCC set up from incorporation to operational.
So Mahip, there is a question. I mean, do we need to set up office and you need to be physically over there, or you have to buy or have an office or put people in operations over there for BCC, or how it is?
So basically, VCC can be set up only by a fund manager in Singapore. And for getting your fund management license in Singapore, you need to have minimum 2 investment professionals with 5 years of experience in the fund management industry to be stationed in Singapore. So while these people, of course, for their Singapore business can travel outside, but they cannot have a residence and outside of Singapore. Beyond these 2 people, if you have any resources who are based outside but still on the MAS representative list, that's still feasible, but minimum 2 people needs to be based in Singapore in this fund management company.
So I think we have one question I'm just taking from the top now. So if you have experienced IFSC regulatory working, what challenges you feel that IFSC is having, especially about unified regulator and other compared with MS? We are working almost 6 months, but due to regulatory issues, we are unable to operationalize our fund. So I think here one of the participants is talking about that they have been working with the IFSCA for last 6 months and still they are not able to operationalize their fund. And I think it would be more quick in Singapore. But I want to make a point here that Singapore as a jurisdiction is age old and it's a properly developed, regulated, and it has taken its own shape. Everything is in place. IFSCA is a new one, and even their real regulations got published few days back. So, but now we are closely working with IFSCA and other people there. So on for our various clients. So what I can say that they are quite responsive. If you put a message, you get response. So maybe prior to these regulations, there may be some, it is my view, there may be some unclarity, something may be unclear, but now the things are quite fast. And I think you would be able to get quick response and operate your fund at the earliest. Even if you can connect with us, I'll try to help you whatever things are there on operational part of the fund. So I think there is a question here. What is the implication of Pillar 2 for the fund based in Singapore? So any of you, Mahip, so I'm not aware of Pillar 2. Can you just?
That's Pillar 2 is basically the minimum global tax. Number 1, there's likely to be a carve out for the funds from the Pillar 2, and number 2, Pillar 2 is applicable only for those groups, MNC groups, which have a total turnover of more than 750 million euro. So typically, most of the fund managers except top 1,000 in the world, or not even top 1,000, top 500 in the world may be caught by this. Yeah, so largely this may be also carved out. So largely perhaps this Pillar 2 issue should be not that relevant for the fund industry.
So the next question is to both of you, can add line to it, that somebody wants to set up a fund for in Singapore for the purpose of attracting investments for NRI investors. So is a BCC able to facilitate that? What I mean, when we are talking about NRI investors, means the ticket size would be small or maybe large number of investors may be there. So would that be a ideal situation for BCC, or what do you say?
So basically, VCC will serve the purpose as like any other fund vehicle. If other fund vehicle can be set up to do NRI investment from NRI, then even VCC can be used. But overall, from typically a fund structuring perspective, if the NII investors are getting into India under the FPI route, foreign portfolio investor route, then there are some restrictions under the Indian regulations, Samir, as you know, and you can elaborate on that. But there is no such restriction whether you are NRI or otherwise. Of course, if most likely you not be under a retail fund manager, which are very few in Singapore. So typically you would be expected to be a accredited investor even if you're an NRI.
Just let us, for example, let us say there are 300 NRIs. Each want to invest, let us say, $1 million or less than $1 million, $500,000, and that is pooled there and that is invested in Indian startups or Indian companies. Or so how it works? Is that, do you think that's okay, or that's?
No, that should be okay. Insofar this is not a FPI route, because in FPI there's a restriction that overall not more than 49% can be pooled from NRIs. Right? But for the FDI, I believe that there is no such restriction. And VCC vehicle can be used both for FPI as well as FDI.
Yeah. So somebody is asking, is GIFT similar to the VCC spoken about earlier? So as I said, there are different kind of schemes, different kind of set of investors who are investing, and different kind of investment strategies where you are investing. So when you are talking about it is similar or not, so it would depend upon those questions. So you have to give the facts, and on those given facts, people can compare that for this particular thing, GIFT is okay or a Singapore and how it works. But generally, when you're talking about in GIFT, mostly the funds are set up as a trust just because of pass through, but then you can set up as a company and LLP also. But here, when we are talking about VCs, is a form of company to my understanding, which is why small legal structure difference is there. So, but I think if you can, for your particular thing, which is better, if you can get in touch offline with the little bit specifics. So I think the team can just let you know which is the best for you. So what is the data? So what is the conclusion if one wants to transfer a Mauritius fund? Should it be GIFT or Singapore? Preliminary review. So somebody wants to.
Yeah,
So
I don't think we can give you the answer on this. I think what you really need to consider is your investors' needs and whether your strategy, which works better for your strategy as well as taxation purposes, right? Because there is no clear answer. I think what you need to consider is really if your strategy is going to work better in GIFT or BCC, and as well as your investors' company as well. I think that is our answer, because I love Singapore, but I'm not going to say BCC is a solution to everything. I think there are pros and cons for each structure, so you have to do this assessment as a fund manager yourself.
So I think the right answer to this question is, because if you see the various aspects are similar, but most it would depend upon your investors, because there are investors who are comfortable with certain jurisdictions. So whether it is GIFT or Mauritius, more should be dependent on your investors where they are comfortable, and then you can see where different lower aspects, taxation aspect, convenience aspects, cost aspects, and all this. So there are a few questions which are strictly related to GIFT. So is it possible to have unified structure in GIFT IFSC where domestic and offshore capital is pooled and invested in? So for all the audience present here, let me give you one answer, which I think most of the questions would get answered automatically. For and like GIFT is foreign jurisdiction for all purposes. So any Indian who is investing in GIFT, and if that money comes back to India, so there will be some challenges under FEMA. So when the money going from India coming back to India in GIFT, so FEMA issue will be there. So when somebody is asking question whether pooled in offshore and Indian and investing in India, so Indian investment investing in India would be a challenge. Offshore you can bring in, invest in India itself. So I think wherever if people are asking that investors from India forming in GIFT and then they want to invest globally, it's okay, it's fine. Investing back in India, you have a FEMA issue. So AIF working in GIFT can use the same SEBI category registration or separate. As I said, IFSC has come out with their separate guidelines, which are available. You Google it out, you will get those guidelines also. And registration in IFSC is separate than registration with SEBI. So the same registration would not work. You have to register separately in SEBI. And they have given certain different, as I just mentioned, contribution, net worth, and those. So you have to satisfy all those things. So how do we get in touch with GIFT to discuss setting a fund? So GIFT, I mean, their website is there. You can get in touch with us also. We can just we set the things ball rolling. Otherwise, GIFT all connects are there on the website of the GIFT, and they will respond immediately. Or you can get in touch with our team. We can connect you to the relevant person. In GIFT, in GIFT, the process is you have to take GIFT is basically an SEZ. You have to have SEZ approval for setting up your office there, and then you need a approval from IFSC, SEBI-like regulator for a fund. So 2 approvals are required. Both can be done simultaneously, and they are quite quick. तो दो लोग से SEZ वालों जो GIFT City और IFSC, 2 people are involved in to get the things rolling. So if you can connect with both of them, or you can get in touch with us, so we'll put you to it. Are crypto fund and exchange authorized? For what is available and what is, we will do this webinar separately on GIFT City for various things. As you know, in India at the moment, cryptocurrency. Crypto is not, it's in gray area. So I would not say that crypto fund, because there is no regulation. It doesn't say you cannot invest in crypto, but in India it's in gray. So I would not 100% say it is allowed in you want to you can set up a fund in AIF GIFT for crypto. So the question is, do we need to set up an office with staff and operation in Singapore? I think this question was answered by our speakers already. So I think you all can manage Alan, or they need to come over to Singapore and put all those things in, like again office and people, how it is. So Alan, can you respond to this? I mean, again, the question has come whether they need to have an office, or basically they want to know they need to come to Singapore or put their own people there and then open a staff office, or it can be just you all can manage over there.
Sure. So we're talking about whether you need to set up an office with staff in Singapore, right? So again, this boils down back to one of the requirements of the VCC. A VCC needs to be managed by a fund manager in Singapore. So which means that the fund manager entity has to be incorporated in Singapore. While it is not explicitly stated in the requirements, I have heard from fund managers that when they apply for their license, one of the requirements is that they need to have a physical office and they need to have at least 2 employees to act as directors, as professionals of the fund manager company. So the short answer is yes, you need to have an office, you need to have staff in Singapore in order to set up a fund manager company that's regulated by MAS before you can even think about incorporating a VCC.
So Mahib, what I understand that like in GIFT you have to set up FME and all those things. They also need people, fund manager to be there. So, but is there a professional services available in Singapore for doing this, or the guys from India has to go and sit there and all those things?
So yeah, just to take an example that you in the domestic area you have AIFs in India,
Yeah.
right? And those AIFs may need a feeder fund. So we have seen the examples where the domestic AIF managers would contact the fund managers in Singapore, whereby the fund manager in Singapore would of course enter into an arrangement in line with the MAS regulations, such that they can float a feeder fund, and they would still have the discretion to look at the investors, accept the investors, and on as per the mandate, of course, they would invest into the AIF, but they would retain due discretion to comply with the guidelines of MAF. And so at the practical level, this has been very well calibrated in line with the MAS guidelines. So this is feasible, where other fund managers which are already based in Singapore can partner with the India-based fund manager for purpose of floating such structures which can invest then in India.
I think, Mike, we have answered a lot of questions, and it was a really nice interaction with the audiences over here. And we will share for the audience, we will share the presentation of the speakers after this webinar on your registered email ID, which is there. And if you have any questions, you can just, in the presentations, you have email ID, or you can write to India Juris wherever it is convenient to you, and we can just evaluate the things and set the ball rolling for you. So I think with this, I thank both the colleagues, friends, and my speakers, Mahip and Alan, for being available for this webinar. And a warm thank you to the audience as well for joining this webinar and making it a very successful. So thank you all of you, and we'll join again on next edition of our webinars. And I think you can connect with us. And with this, we will leave you a small video of Dhruva Advisors, just to the our audience who would like to know more about them. Thank you all of you. Thank you very much. So Kajal, you can play. Yeah. So I think one of our audience is writing a big thank you for all of us. So it's okay. So yes. So thank you. We'll see you in next edition of our webinar.
Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
I think that was an excellent. I think we can see a lot of people are enjoying this webinar, and it's a very excellent time. I think we had a very good informative day, and we'll be in touch. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Samir. See
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.